Hey there, welcome to the DRACO podcast. We're currently reading The State and Revolution. We're in, I believe, chapter what?
Chapter 3, Section 4.
Chapter 3, section 4. I'm Marxist Hoodlum,
And I'm Drem.
and it's nice to see y'all see our videos. So let's start this off. I'll start reading just to get my brain going. Uh, let me see. I think I got it right here. All right. Is the organization of the unity of the nation?
That's the one.
All right. So number 4, state and revolution. Number 4, organization of the unity of the nation. In a rough sketch of national organization, which the, the commune had no time to develop, it states clearly that the commune was to be the political form of even the smallest country hamlet. The communes were to elect the national delegation in Paris. The few but important functions which still would remain for a central government were not to be suppressed. It has been intentionally misstated, but were to be discharged by the communal and therefore strictly responsible agents. The unity of the nation was not to be broken, but on the contrary, to be organized by the central communal constitution and to become a reality by the destruction of the state power, which claimed to be the embodiment of the unity independent of and superior to the nation itself, from which it was but parasitic excretions. While the merely repressive organs of the old governmental power were to be amputated, its legitimate functions were to be wrested from an authority usurping preeminence over society itself and restored to the responsible agents of society. To what extent the opportunists of present day social democracy have failed to understand, or perhaps it would be more true to say they now want to understand these observations of Marx, is best known by that book of Herostratus fame of the renegade Bernstein, The Premises of Socialism and the Tasks of Social Democracy. It is precisely in connection with the above passage from Marx that Bernstein wrote that this program in its political content displays in all its essential features the greatest similarity to the federalism of Proudhon. In spite of all other points of difference between Marx and the petty bourgeois Proudhon, Bernstein places the words petty bourgeois in quotations of Marx in order to make it sound ironical. On these points, their lines of reasoning run as close as could be. Of course, Bernstein continues the importance of the municipalities is growing, but it seems doubtful to me whether the first task of democracy would be such a dissolution of the modern states and such a complete transformation of their organization as is visualized by Marx and Proudhon. The formation of a national assembly from delegates of the provincial or district assemblies, which in their turn would consist of delegates from the communes, so that the whole previous mode of national representation will vanish completely. To confuse, to confuse Marx's views on the destruction of the state power, the parasitic accretions with Proudhon's federalism is positively monstrous, but it is no accident, for it never occurs to the opportunist that Marx does not speak here at all about federalism as opposed to centralism, but about smashing the old bourgeois state machine which exists in all bourgeois countries. The only thing that penetrates the opportunist's mind is what he sees around him. In a society of petty bourgeois militantism and reformist stagnation, namely, only municipalities, the opportunist has ever forgotten how to think about the proletarian revolution. It is ridiculous. But the remarkable thing is that nobody argued with Bernstein on this point. Bernstein has been refuted by many, especially by Plekhanov in Russian literature and by Kautsky in European literature, but neither of them said anything about this distortion of Marx by Bernstein. To such an extent has the opportunist forgotten how to think in a revolutionary way and to ponder over revolution that he attributes federalism to Marx and confuses him with the founder of anarchism, Proudhon. And Kautsky and Plekhanov, who claim to be orthodox Marxists and defenders of the doctrine of revolutionary Marxism, are silent on this point. Here lies one of the roots of the extreme vulgarization of the views concerning the difference between Marxism and anarchism, which is characteristics of the Kautskyists and of the opportunists, and which we shall yet discuss later. Marx above quoted observations on the experience of the commune contain not a trace of federalism. Marx agreed with Proudhon on the very point that the opportunist Bernstein failed to see. Marx disagreed with Proudhon on the very point on which Bernstein found a similarity between them. Marx agreed with Proudhon in that they both stood for the smashing of the present state machine. The similarity of views on this point between Marxism and anarchism, both Proudhon and Bakunin, neither the opportunists nor the Kautskyist wished to see, because on this point they had departed from Marxism. Marx disagreed with both with Proudhon and with Bakunin precisely on the question of federalism, not to mention the dictatorship of the proletariat. Federalism as a principle follows logical from the petty bourgeois views of anarchism. Marx was a centralist. There is no departure whatever from centralism in his observation just quoted. Only those who are imbued with the Philistine superstition belief in the state can mistake the destruction of the bourgeoisie state machine for the destruction of centralism. But if the proletariat and the poorest peasantry take state power into their own hands, organize themselves quite freely in communes, and unite the action of all the communes in striking at capital, in crushing the resistance of the capitalists, and in transferring the privately owned railways, factories, and so forth to the entire nation, the whole of the society, will that not be centralism? Will that not be the most consistent democratic centralism and proletariat centralism at that? Bernstein simply cannot conceive of the possibility of voluntarily centralism, of the voluntary amalgamation of the communes into a nation, of voluntary fusion of proletariat communes for the purpose of destroying the bourgeois rule and the bourgeois state machine. Like all Philistines, Bernstein can imagine centralism only as something from above, to be imposed and maintained solely by the bureaucracy and the military clique. Marx, as though foreseeing the possibility of his views being distorted, purposely emphasized the fact that the charge that the commune wanted to destroy the unity of the nation, to abolish the central authority, was a deliberate fake. Marx purposely used the words, the unity of the nation was to be organized so as to oppose conscious democratic proletarian centralism to bourgeoisie military bureaucratic centralism. But these are none so deaf as those who will not hear. And the very thing the opportunists of present day social democracy do not want to hear about is the destruction of the state power and the amputation of the parasitic exclusion.
All right, good deal.
All right. Just give a minute before I ask a question. My mouth is dry, so.
That's cool.
So my first question is gonna relate to a nation. Mm-hmm. What is a nation? What characteristics classify a group of people as a nation?
I guess sometimes it can be like a specific, maybe it's a specific landmass. In like the case of Hawaii, like they would consider themselves a nation of people who like share maybe like the same ancestral background and cultural norms and stuff like that, while also being conveniently surrounded by nothing but water, like those being their natural borders. But a nation in a more modern context, usually has it can be usually has arbitrary borders, with with state machinery, including military and public works that seek to maintain and at times expand the holdings of that land, oftentimes justifying it for the people. That gets more into politics than actual being a nation. That's more colonialism than anything. Um, but yeah, that's my closest definition to it.
Okay. So
It doesn't have to be that, but it can be that.
yeah. So before I say this to the listeners out there or the viewers out there, don't crucify me for this because I have not read the nation question. I have not read the nation question in 3 years. It's been 3 years. So Son says, like, I'm gonna say really basic because I don't remember much about the book. I'm gonna be honest with you, but he says, like, he asks questions like, what if, like, like, these people speak the same language? Does that make them a nation? What if these people, like, have the same culture? Does that make them a nation?
Mm-hmm.
What if these people have the same, I'm not sure if this was in the book, but uh, the same kind of like mindset on how like things should work out. Isn't that a nation? It was very more intricate than what I'm saying right now, because he goes on to further say that all these elements, and not just the ones I said, but like more elements that he had, uh, form what he believed a nation should be. My second question would be, and I have to tell you, Draco went from national to continental, meaning that we're Draco continental now, meaning that we believe that all the Americas is a supercontinent and should be ruled uh, either through a Soviet style um, scheme or under one government. How would you describe, like, the continental, from the national, in terms of, like, which one would be a better approach in your opinion?
Um, that largely depends on, um, what the current material conditions are. Though, uh, in order to have a successful, in order to have a successful national group or campaign, you have to make sure that, like, all the other budding and regional areas are supporting the national one, and then once the national one gets enough support, you also have to uh, get all the other nations on board, and then to basically, do what the USSR did, which was basically make their region, and their continent, much larger, more cohesive, like-minded, um, like-minded state apparatus. Yeah, I'm using the term state loosely here.
Yeah.
Which would be, it also depends on what your goals are. What's the national outlook would probably have a different set of goals and endpoints than a continental one. Each one grander than the next, I'm sure. Uh, for right now, which approach is better? You know, it's hard to say without the numbers. So,
Yeah. I think all of the Americas, they, at least the central, the South, um, especially the South, has been, literally fucked by CIA operations in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only solution into like a new government would be to unite all these countries into one uh, continental um, um, continental
Body.
body, yeah, continental body that is able to like, because like, for example, like how do we when we're talking about like reconciling things, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer that that Palestine should be for Palestinians. Israel is a settler colonial. Um, but then when we think about it here in America, like what about the the whole part of like California and Texas and all that stuff that was part of Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
um, and was taken from Mexico? Like, how do you reconcile that by just being a communist party in the United States? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you reconcile like the Native Americans taking their land? Like, how do you reconcile all that? And just by all of us here in the Americas, not looking at us by differences, but by how we are similar to each other and
Mm-hmm.
how we want to like strive to be better in this world. So I really like I really think the continental route is the way to go. Do you know who Bakunin?
I've heard of him. I know anarchists like to talk about reference him a lot.
Yeah, I have a book by him, not physical format. I have it like in an e format. God in the stage, something like that. I
Mm-hmm.
started reading it and it was like it's, I just didn't understand it. Understand it in terms of like, it's not that I didn't understand it. I just didn't like to format it. How it was formatted.
Mm-hmm.
It was really weird to read. So, do you know who Proud Hunt is?
I've heard him less than I've heard Bakunin.
He's in a. If any of y'all want to call me out if I'm wrong, I believe that he's a father of anarchism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a.
I
I
recall
think
reading.
I think his name is Pierre
Pierre.
Proudhon or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
or some because there's a lot of Pierres, Pietros, Peters that
Mm-hmm.
are anarchists that
Yeah,
are like
yeah.
known. So I get it confused, but yeah, like this was a very heavy debate during March time. Um, but yeah, let's continue on.
Mm-hmm. So the next section will be section 5, the destruction of the parasite state. So we have already quoted part of Marx's statements on this subject and must now complete his presentation. It is generally the fate of completely new historical creations, wrote Marx, to be mistaken for the counterpart of older and even defunct forms of social life, to which they may hear a certain likeness. Thus, this new commune, which breaks the modern state power, has been mistaken for the reproduction of the medieval communes, for a federation of small states, Montesquieu and Girondins, for an exaggerated form of the ancient struggle against over centralization. The communal constitution would have restored to the social body all the forces hitherto absorbed by the state parasite feeding upon and clogging the free movements of society. By this act, it would have initiated the regeneration of France. The communal constitution brought the rural producers under the intellectual lead of the central towns of their districts, and there secured to them, in the working men, the natural trustees of their interests. The very existence of the commune involved, as a matter of course, local municipal liberty, but no longer as a check upon the now superseded state power. Breaks upon the modern state power, which was a parasitic excrescence, is amputation, its destruction, the now superseded state power. These are expressions used by Marx regarding the state, which he appraised and analyzed the experience of the commune. All this was written a little less than half a century ago. and now one has to undertake excavations, as it were, in order to bring uncorrupted Marxism to the knowledge of the masses. The conclusions drawn from the observation of the last great revolution, through which Marx lived, have been forgotten just at the moment when the time had arrived for the next great proletarian revolutions. The municipality of interpretations to which the commune has been subjected and the municipality of interest which has construed it in their favor show that it was a thoroughly expansive political form, while all previous forms of government had been emphatically repressive. Its true secret was this: it was essentially a working class government, the product of the struggle of the producing against the appropriating class, the political form at last discovered under which to work out the economical emancipation of labor. Except on this last condition, the communal constitution would have been an impossibility and a delusion. The utopians busied themselves with the discovery of the political forms under which the socialist reconstruction of society could take place. The anarchists turned away from the question of political forms altogether. The opportunists of modern social democracy accepted the bourgeois political forms of a parliamentary, democratic state as the limit which cannot be overstepped. They broke their foreheads praying before this idol, denouncing as anarchism every attempt to destroy these forms. Marx deducted from the whole history of socialism and political struggle that the state was bound to disappear, and that the transitional form of this disappearance, the transition from the political state to no state, would be the proletariat organized as the ruling class. But Marx did not undertake the task of discovering the political forms of this future stage. He limited himself to an extent observation of French history, its analysis, and the conclusion to which the year 1851 had led, vis-a-vis that matters were moving towards the destruction of the bourgeois machinery of the state. And when the mass revolutionary movement of the proletariat burst forth, Marx, in spite of the failure of that movement, in spite of its short life and its patent weakness, began to study what political forms it had disclosed. The commune is the form at last discovered by the proletarian revolution, under which the economic liberation of labor can proceed. The commune is the first attempt of a proletarian revolution to break up the bourgeois state machinery and constitutes the political form at last discovered, which can and must take the place of the broken machine. We shall see below that the Russian revolutions of 1905 and 1917, in different surroundings and under different circumstances, continued the work of the commune and confirmed the historic analysis made by the genius of Marx. Want to keep going, or are we asking questions?
Yeah, we're asking questions.
Cool.
So there's a I want to state some there's a striking sentence there that says the commune is the first attempt of a proletarian revolution to smash the bourgeois state machine and its political form at last discovered, by which the smashed state machine can and must be replaced. So this happened during Marx's time. He was very when it happened, he was very happy and supporting the Paris Commune. And even when it failed, he even it was still he wasn't happy that it failed, but he was still this was a great advancement towards the proletarian struggle. I know this is gonna be a little bit of a hard question, because I know you haven't read the Paris Commune, and I've only read a little bit of it. But how do you think I know the summary of it. How do you think why the Paris Commune failed?
I can't really give you an educated answer on that. It's I think they were kind of yeah, even with what little I know, I can't really hazard a guess. My guess would always be like instigation from outside forces, as is, um, those in power want to do. But I think I'd be telling a lie since I don't know that much.
No, that's totally fine. Like I'm just trying to grasp your your thinking process of it. Of what it is. I don't have the answer either. What I can like formulate from what I read. Excuse me for a second. Sorry
Yeah.
about this. Is that the Paris Commune? What ended up happening was by Lenin's words is that it smashed the state, but it failed to form like a new state. In other words, there was still like the the state within the oppressive state that was trying to attack it, and it failed to form like a state because of its size. You know, it wasn't the material conditions weren't there.
Hmm.
So this is why Lenin says like it is imperative to take over the state because the state is a tool
Hmm.
to oppress those outside forces, mainly the capitalist class, and to uphold workers' values, struggles, and people like to say the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is in reference to having a dictatorship towards the rich, the capitalists, and having in at least in Russia the Soviet democracy. I like to say is like the proletariat democracy.
Hmm.
I think that's a better word to use nowadays because a lot of people have those connotations. They don't understand where the dictatorship part comes from and what it means and what it relates to. And I understand there's some people out there that says, oh, that rich people and capitalist people shouldn't, be held like um, they shouldn't be held to a certain degree, like in a dictatorship, they should also be free. But if you allow these people to be free, they will take over the means of production. They will take over everything. They will take over factories. They will take over like even tech, and they're gonna just put in capital. There was a formula in Marx capital or Das Capital, which was like it was something like CMC, like capital, money, and then capital after that. Like you have capital, you make money, you get more capital. You do this by uh, getting the workers a surplus value. The workers are not given their uh, fair wage that they should be getting, and they should be getting more. A lot of people should be getting more money. Even janitors should be getting more money,
Hmm.
and so they use this to bring in more capital and further expand the empires. This is why we are not egalitarianism. We do not believe in the equality of everybody. No, like the rich, like dictatorship of the proletariat is to oppress the rich, and we use the state as a tool to do that. And again, I like to use a proletariat democracy in order for us to have a democracy. Because what are you closer to? Are you closer to being like a millionaire, or are you closer to be homeless? And you have to ask yourself that, like, really, like you have to really like search deep inside, even if you're a petit bourgeois, like
Yeah.
you're still not close to those millions of dollars. You're more closer to one day fucking up and ended up homeless and nobody giving a fuck about you because this country's like this.
Yeah. And if you're still unconvinced, I always like to repeat the study or the statistics that right now about a little over 50% of the country is making $30,000 or less. That's not a livable wage at all. And 60% of the country, that's 60% of everyone, is living paycheck to paycheck. So, and in a system where we've been told and we've been propagandized to that, oh no, you can make it if you work hard enough, where people are working one, two, three, sometimes four jobs uh, to make just to pay rent. Forget buying food. Forget affording, being able to afford, the little luxuries that we're allowed in life. I'm not talking like buying, 80-foot catamarans, to go sailing, 3 times a year. No, no, that's luxury. But it's still like if you do well for yourself, I don't see why you shouldn't. But if you're having to choose between medicine, rent, and baby formula, that puts a lot of people in a very very restrictive environment, and it makes in general it oversees and invokes a feeling of malaise among other people a lot, especially post COVID. It was kind of like the the mask got pulled off and people are more distrustful now. People are more, we see like that everybody's on edge. Everybody's winging it, but everybody's on edge. And that's not a healthy society to have. And the way to undo that is through social programs, making sure everyone's basic needs are met, so that they can take their excess, uh, whatever excess they can get, so they can, hey, we can go to the movies with my kid. We don't have to. We're not being pulled from every strand, from every which way in every direction, and in general pain and malaise. But under a capitalist system, social welfare is not the priority. It's the PR campaign that the left wing of capital, i.e., the Democrats, like to tell people that they're all about, and some Republicans as well. But in reality, it's how can I get my donors who are already fantastically well off? They've been well off since they were born, and how can I get them more money? Because then that money will be put in a super PAC to help me win my next election. So, uh, to most of you, this is not news at all. If you're new to this, and you've maybe observed this and you think, hey, what's um, you've observed this and you thought, oh, this is for sure. Like I see this happening. I just haven't heard anybody put it into words. Well, allow us to be those people, and help you through those feelings. You're completely justified in feeling in being disgusted with that system and wanting nothing to do with it. You are justified in that.
Yeah, that's very true. Um, let's continue on. Do you mind reading another one?
Yeah, yeah, I'll go on. So next we're going to go to chapter 4, section 1. This is supplemental explanations by Engels. Is the housing question. Marx gave the fundamentals on the question of the meaning of the experience of the commune. Engels returned to the same question repeatedly, elucidating Marx's analysis and conclusions, sometimes so forcibly throwing other sides of the question into relief that we must dwell on these explanations separately. 1. The housing question. In his work on the housing question, 1872, Engels took into account the experience of the commune, dwelling repeatedly on the task of the revolution in relation to the state. It is interesting to note that the treatment of this concrete subject there became clear. On the one hand, the features common to the proletarian state and the present state, features which permit the speaking of a state in both cases, and, on the other hand, the features which differentiate them, or the transition to the destruction of the state. How then is the housing question to be solved? In present day society, it is solved as every other social question is solved, by the gradual economic equalization of supply and demand, a solution which ever anew begets the very same question and is consequently no solution at all. How a social revolution would solve this question depends not only on the circumstances then existing, but is also connected with much more far reaching questions, one of the most important of which is the abolition of the antagonism between town and country. It is as it is not our business to make any utopian systems for the organization of the society of the future, it would be more than idle to go into this. But this much at least is certain, that in the large towns there are already enough dwelling houses that these were made rational use of to immediately relieve any real housing shortage. Does it sound familiar to anyone? Uh, this, of course, can only be done by the expropriation of the present owners and by quartering in their houses workers who are homeless or excessively overcrowded in their present quarters. And as soon as the proletariat has conquered political power, such a measure, demanded in the interest of public welfare, would be as easy to carry through as other expropriations and quarterings by the state of today. Here, the change in the form of the state power is not considered, but only the content of its activity. Expropriations and the occupation of houses take place by order, even of the present state. The proletarian state, from the formal point of view, will also order the occupation of houses and expropriation of buildings. But it is clear that the old executive apparatus, the bureaucracy connected with the bourgeoisie, would simply be unfit to carry out the orders of the proletarian state. It must, however, be stated that the actual seizures of possession of all instruments of labor, the taking possession of the whole industry by the working people, it is the direct opposite of the Proudhonist solution. In the latter, the individual worker becomes the owner of a house, a farm, and the instruments of labor. In the former, the working people remains the collective owner of the houses, factories, and instruments of labor, and will hardly, at any rate during a transition period, hand over the usufruct to these to individuals or the companies unless the costs are met by them. It is just the same as with the abolition of property in land, which is not the abolition of ground rent, but only its transfer, even though in modified form, to society. The actual taking possession of all instruments of labor by the working people therefore by no means excludes the retention of rent relations. One question touched upon here, namely, the economic reasons for the withering away of the state, we shall discuss in the next chapter. Engels expresses himself most cautiously, saying that the proletarian state will hardly allot houses without pay, at any rate during a transition period. The renting out to separate families of houses belonging to the whole people presupposes the collection of rent, a certain amount of control, and some rules underlying the allotment of houses. All this demands a certain form of state, but it does not at all demand a special military and bureaucratic apparatus, which officials occupying especially privileged positions. Transition to a state of affairs, when it will be possible to let houses without rent, is bound up with the complete withering away of the state. Speaking of the conversion of the Blanquists, after the Commune and under the influence of its experience, to the principles of Marxism, Engels, in passing, formulates these principles as follows. Necessity of political action by the proletariat and its dictatorship as a transition to the abolition of classes and, with them, of the state. Those addicted to hair-splitting criticism, and those who belong to the bourgeois, exterminators of Marxism, will perhaps see a contradiction in the above quotation from the Anti-Düring between the avowal of the abolition of the state and the repudiation of a formula like the anarchist one. It would not be surprising if the opportunists stamped Engels, too, as an anarchist, for the social chauvinists are now more and more adopting the method of accusing the internationalists of anarchism. That, together with the abolition of classes, the state will also be abolished, Marxism has always taught. The well known passage on the withering away of the state in the Anti Düring does not blame the anarchists for being in favor of the abolition of the state, but for preaching that the state can be abolished within 24 hours. In the view of the fact that the present predominant social democratic doctrine completely distorts the relation of Marxism to anarchism on the question of the abolition of the state, it would be quite useful to recall a certain polemic of Marx and Engels against the anarchists.
All right. So I think we're gonna stop there for now for today.
Okay.
We're gonna have a brief discussion about this. I'm not gonna ask you a question about this because it's pretty straightforward. I think we all
Mm-hmm.
uh, have like issues with like housing problems and stuff, and like rent and stuff. Um, I want to say my experience. Engel says like how does this get fixed, like the housing problem, because there are enough of houses. It's just that people can't afford them, and it's the same thing that's happening right now. There is no shortage of houses. It's just that people can't afford them, and he says it's by boosting the economy, supply and demand. Um, I was in a tenants union for a year or two, and we were working in a duplex apartments, and we were talking to the people. We were going there every day. We were, it was very like a lot of people say, like I see a lot of people say on the internet, like, oh, these people are squatters, or these people don't want to pay. They're like low lives. I had personal like experience seeing these houses that were damaged, like things were damaged, roofs were coming apart, and the owner did not want to fix it. So why the fuck would they pay the fucking rent? It is by Florida law that if the fucking owner does not uh uh fix what he's supposed to fix, you don't have to pay rent at all until he fixes it. And that was an issue with that, and there was many people that were having problems with that. And what the the moral of the story is that we finally ended up doing a tenants union in that duplex, and it failed. It failed within a couple weeks. We made demands, stuff like that. I mean, the only thing that we got like done was the original owners. We harassed them so much that they sold the duplex to some rich guy who was like turning apartments into condos and stuff like that. And the guy, the owner, fucking died of a heart attack. Thank God, that piece of shit. Because these people were pieces of shit. They lived like down the corner in a nice house, a really nice house and all that stuff. We harassed them with like signs and stuff. Call them slumlords, which they were. But the eventually, like the new owner was like, hey, if you leave, you get your security deposit. Like and a lot of people took their security deposit. They were like, fuck it, I'm leaving. I'm going to live with my sister. I'm getting some bread, but my security deposit back, and it ended up like falling apart, which is why is what Engel said. Like the 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 only way you're gonna get rent free houses is through the sorry,
Withering away of the state.
withering away of the state, meaning socialism. Like in many socialist countries, people did not pay rent. They worked, and they had a free housing in Soviet Union, DPRK, Cuba, all these countries. So that's the only way that's the issue with the housing question is going to be solved. I still like think about like whether I should start a tenants union or try to help these people as much as I can. Within the capitalist means of the system, but again, as Engel said, it's boost the economy, get the workers a better wage so they can afford these houses. Is how you do it in a capitalist system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and for anyone maybe disagreeing and saying like, oh well, what about what's the reproach or what's the retort for that? It's like, oh well, these landlords, they work hard, they just want to make
No, they don't.
it. It's like they absolutely do not. Landlords are to housing what scalpers are to sports tickets. It's like you, and with the exception being like you don't need sports tickets, but you maybe want them. But it's a good analogy either way. It's like I could pay, I could pay um, the the American Airlines Arena or whatever it's called now. I could pay them, $50 for a ticket, or and I could be able to attend a game and watch, watch the home team play, or uh, but what landlords end up doing? They're the scalpers. They come in and say, "Oh, look at all these very cheap seats for $50." They and they come in, they buy it up, and then they upcharge you, they upsell you, and they're like, that $50 ticket is now a $150 ticket. And it's like, well, these are the only ones available, and these are the cheapest ones on late notice. So sometimes you have no choice but to pay. Now you can always choose to walk away from seating for a sports game. You can't do the same with housing. So you need somewhere to live, especially if you work, or even if you don't work. Those are your basic requirements for living as a human being. You need shelter, you need food, you need security, and they make, in this capitalist system, those uh, those basics are they commodify them and they sell them, and I don't need to tell you guys the rest. And so it's especially important to uh, wretch ownership of even our houses from the landlords. And the only reason they're able to do this, by the way, is that it's enforced by the state, whether by the actual state that you live in or the federal government. The police can come in and evict you on behalf of the landlord because, hey, you're not profitable anymore. Oh, hey, you stopped paying rent because you ran out of, you got kicked off your job during COVID, and nobody was hiring. So you know at that point, you know at that point, what should have been an opportunity for mass revolution, and really, really taking back what was ours, but without a united and informed proletariat, and organized proletariat, uh, it was really kind of a wasted moment. But that's another topic for discussion.
I was in a, I went to law school, so we got a handy dandy little thing that we could search up people, and we can find out everything about them, their mortgage, like the cars they have, like everything that you can think of, like we could find them. And I didn't know about this until I went to work with a law firm, and they told me about it, that I had this feature. Apparently, they give this to all law students. Unfortunately, like it ended while I graduated, and I can no longer use it. I tried to use it. I had to call the company. First of all, they told me I had to be a corporation, police officer, or a landlord in order
Mm.
to buy this. So like I was like, okay, fine, I'll make some fucking corporation right now and buy it. And it was $10,000 a year. Now,
That's a lot.
like fucking like there are landlords that have this, they use it on tenants. How would you feel about your landlord knowing everything about you?
Hmm.
Like they're not nice people. They're not out there to be your friends, And I'll be honest. I've when I lived in Coral Gables, I never really had a problem with my landlords because I wouldn't talk to them as much. And I would when I would had to pay rent, I would go at night and you know put it through the door, because I didn't want to interact with them. But like that doesn't mean that if I would have like really got to know them, or if I didn't pay rent for whatever reason, they wouldn't just throw me out like like nothing. Like, these people are, they're the scum of the earth.
They're only as friendly to you so long as the checks keep coming in and coming in on time. You know, I'm sure there. I'm sure I've heard stories of very lenient landlords who've gone above and beyond to do the most to do the opposite of what most landlords are known for, to do repair the work on time in a timely manner, and help them with their maybe help them with their groceries and stuff like that. But the only reason they can do those things is because you, the tenant, are providing them the money to pay their mortgage for the property they own. They're not the ones. It's not coming out of their pocket. It's coming out of yours. So whenever you're renting, just think, it's a reason why people have a conniption over renting versus a mortgage. With a mortgage, you're at least building equity in your house and such. But with rent, that money's literally just going to somebody else. They're paying their rent and then taking some off the top, and that's per owner. We all know what rental agreements are. So think about when anyone ever tries to like hand wave away, oh, but they're the mom and pop landowners. I don't give a fuck, man. They are it. Housing should not be seen as a commodity. Housing should be, and in my opinion, is a right. Everyone needs housing. Everyone needs medical care. Everyone needs food. These are things you cannot live without: water, shelter, food, and how and clothing. These things should be rights and should not be commodified so easily. So
And for people who disagree, just think about it. How is a homeless person gonna get a job when he can't even shower, or he can't even like do the basic things in order to look presentable? You think any job is gonna hire that homeless person?
he doesn't even have an address to send his check.
Yeah, like doesn't have an address to even put down for the job. And
Mm-hmm.
I have heard though that you could actually like religious institutions. If you ask them, you can put the address for there.
Mm-hmm.
If they tell you yes, that's if they tell you yes.
Oh, okay.
But it's still like w- when it rains, right? If you're up there when it snows, I know people say like there's homeless shelter, and maybe maybe in New York it's a little bit better, but here in Florida, I have personal experience with this because I've been trying to help a homeless friend. We went there, waited 4 hours for a band to come in, and they told us, yeah, we don't have beds today. Sorry, like good luck. I saw a woman with 4 kids like talking to them, like because I'm betting she didn't have a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now that this law is coming up, that homeless people can't even sleep
Sleep
in
in public places.
yeah sleep in public places, like are you serious? Like
Mm-hmm.
what right does the government have to say that? I kind of understand like private places, right? I to a certain degree I understand personal places like homes, like you get me, you don't want someone to be sleeping like in your driveway or something that you don't know. I get that, that's totally valid. Private places, yeah, I get it. You don't want to be like you don't want like a homeless person sleeping like right next to your store. Okay, I get that, but not even public places. Like what the fuck, what kind of mentality is that? What are you creating? What environment are you creating? You're gonna create these people, you're gonna make them go be very desperate and do something bad.
They're already in a desperate situation, and you're
But
just criminalizing
I,
their misfortunes
yeah,
as
no,
well.
they're already in a desperate situation. But I'm saying like these people, like if I was in that position, I would probably rob a bank. Like not even lying, fucking like we rob a bank and like I'm not dealing with this shit. Like it is what it is.
You see why it pushes people into those extreme acts for sure.
Yeah,
It's like, hey, look, this system requires money for me to live and survive. You guys won't listen to me without it, so I got to get it one way or another. The bank is insured, you know.
yeah.
So But anyway,
Yeah. So this has been a good talk. Again, I'm Mark Sosola.
and I'm Drem.
Thank you all for watching or listening. This is the DRACO podcast, and we'll see you next time.